2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 6. I want to make sure it stays in context. Remember, well, first of all, it's worth saying, you already realize Paul didn't write in chapters and verses. So he wrote like you and I write. It more or less is a stream of consciousness kind of thing. But for us, we have to look at the stream. And earlier in chapter 4, really, from the beginning of chapter 4, Paul writes in the context of Timothy's work as the minister in the church at Ephesus, and gives him strong instruction. It kind of like, I don't know, where does instruction become command? Well, it's right there at that tipping point where Paul directs Timothy. These are, well, I give you this charge. That's in verse 1. Okay, and let's just read it. Preach the word. Be prepared in season and out of season. Correct, rebuke, and encourage with great patience and careful instruction. For the time will come when people will not put up with sound doctrine. Instead, to suit their own desires, they will gather around them a great number of teachers to say what their itching ears want to hear. They will turn their ears away from the truth and turn aside to myths. Now, does that sound like any of our experience? Now, I'm not just talking about people who disagree with me politically or have a philosophical disagreement. I'm talking about people who disregard the truth, because if I could categorize the people Paul's talking about, they have turned away from the truth. They have disregarded the truth. And instead they have opted for what they want to hear. Okay, that's never not been a problem. It's not just in the 2020s. Okay, but so then he goes on, but you keep your head in all situations, endure hardship, do the work of an evangelist, discharge all the duties of your ministry. And now Paul becomes very personal in verse 6. For I am already being poured out like a drink offering, and the time for my departure is near. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing. I don't know how old Paul was when he wrote these words. I'm feeling that he was, I don't know that he was even in his 60s, but you have to think about what's the life expectancy of men in century 1. Well, not very many. Now, some did, but not very many lived beyond about 60. So there's that. Now, here's the other part. I think Paul, as he writes to Timothy, has a growing awareness that his remaining time is short. I never used to think about that. When I was in my 20s, I don't know if you thought about your life projecting into your 60s and 70s when you were in your 20s, good on you. You probably got a really good retirement plan going because you would have started it back then. Me, I couldn't even imagine myself being 50, let alone 60 or 70. But now here I am. And in these days, these recent years, I am confronted more and more often with the fact that I'm terminal. I'm I'm I don't know how long God's going to let me live, but I do know this. I'm a day closer to my end today than I was yesterday. And I realize in a much different way than when I was young that this today, what I'm doing now, I don't get any guarantees that I'll be doing that tomorrow. See, our mortality is it's a little bit sneaky. We can repress, push down, disregard the fact of our mortality because it really just gets in the way of primarily enjoying the moment. But there is this other side of it. Our mortality needs to. I'm not thinking we need to just sit around and morbidly contemplate, cheapers, I could die today. Oh my gosh, I could die today. Well, the truth is, we could, but Paul wasn't wrapped around that axle. He was fully aware of the temporary nature of his life, and he seems completely aware that he was coming to the end of the line. I am already being poured out like a drink offering. Now, in order to understand that, you have to have some background in Jewish religious practice. And my one of the places we have to look is at temple worship. One of the offerings that a Jew could / should bring to the temple, earlier the tabernacle, was a drink offering. This would have been wine. And please don't get me into a debate about, well, is that fermented alcoholic wine or is that just grape juice? I'm convinced it was fermented alcoholic wine, okay? We could go into that, but I'm not going to. Which, by the way, doesn't mean, so drink as much wine as you want. That's not what I'm saying. I don't even know why I brought that up. It just clouds a picture. Well, anyway, move on. You would bring that wine as an offering, but you didn't get it back. The priest would pour it out. That's what Paul's talking about. A drink offering was poured out. And here one of the most important things about that is, you can't use it again. It's gone. That's what makes it a sacrifice, an offering. One of my favorite places in the Old Testament where you have an enactment of a drink offering. It comes back in David's life. He and his mighty men, actually they were I don't know that they were all criminals, but they were kind of all wanted men or disregarded men, disenfranchised, whatever term you want to use. But anyway, they were on the run from Saul. And one day, in the hearing of his closest circle, he says, and this is my gross paraphrase, man, what I wouldn't give for a drink of the water out of that well in Bethlehem. Wow. Now, these guys didn't just hang out in the city. They were out in the wilderness. And if you've ever been to the Judean wilderness, both sides of the Jordan River, it's pretty barren. And so, I can understand how David would say, I'm thirsty, but that water from the well, there's nothing better. These two guys overheard it. They sneak out at night. They go through the enemy lines, and they bring back, I don't know whether it was a skin or a jug, but they bring back water from that well, and they present it to David. And David looks at it and looks at them and says, I can't drink this. And he pours it out as an offering, as a drink offering to God. And while it may sound like a disrespectful thing toward the guys that went and got it, it wasn't disrespectful. And that was an honoring to say, you guys risked your lives to bring me this. It's too precious for me to drink. And so he poured it out. In a way, Paul is saying, that's my life. And at this point, he says, I am already being poured out like a drink offering. Now, I want my life to be an offering to God. I want my life, in a sense, to be a drink offering poured out for God. I think you do too. Here's the thing. If my life is not a drink offering poured out for God, then the other alternative is I am one of two things. I'm holding on to it because that's what I want, and I'll always go for what I want, or I'm pouring it out for everybody else, but I'm not pouring it out for God. Which ultimately comes back to, it's mine, I'll do with it what I want. I don't want to be that guy. I am often, I don't like that. I want to repent of that. I want my life to be like a drink offering poured out. Well, what does that look like? For Paul, it was part of what he saw, envisioned, was convinced of as his last. I mean, this was the point of termination for him. See, the point is, if it's poured out, there's nothing left. And Paul's almost, I don't think he's saying, Timothy, I'm working off an empty tank here. No, I think he's saying, how he told Timothy earlier, just one thought earlier, discharge the duties of your ministry. I think in one sense, Paul, with this word picture, is saying, I am discharging my ministry to the end. I'm already being poured out like a drink offering. I don't want to produce guilt with this, but it is a challenge. How are you doing with that? How are we doing, you and I, how are we doing with the idea that our life is an offering to God? And there will come a point, there has to come a point where there's nothing more to give. And so it will be over for us. But until that time comes, are we holding on to it, this wine of our own life? Or are we willingly, lovingly discharging the duties of our ministry, which amounts to pouring out our lives as a drink offering? Bottom line is, are you serving you? Am I serving me? And yeah, I hate the honest answer is, yeah, I'm serving me. Okay, then what could I do that would turn that, where my life is not about me being happy and comfortable. It's about me making my life an offering to God. Okay, I'll see you next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.